This is Travis Wayne Goodsell, and this is part 4 of the Constitutional Government video lecture series. And this one is Freedom of the Press. And as I've already discussed with the religion and speech, the press likewise are not allowed to lie. They are only to report the news. It's very simple to do, but when money is involved, exaggerating the news, being selective about the news, pointing out the pop culture or what is violent and sexual in nature, draws more attention from people. And there's the tendency in news to cater to consumers rather than being loyal to the Constitution. And the only way to stop that completely is to do away with the monetary system, so that the press is free to report the news and not be extorted based on viewer and subscriber memberships and whatever. There's a lot of talk under Trump about fake news. I don't think anybody knows what actual fake news is. Fake news is when the press lies. And that can take many forms. Wag the Dog was a movie. I believe Robert De Niro was in it. In which a news story about a fake war was perpetuated and tricked the people. War of the Worlds. If you remember that book, and it was read on the radio, and people tuned into the radio and heard the words of the book and panicked and thought the earth was under actual invasion. And so that was kind of cool. But we have people who are legitimate press organizations, people who are officially news organizations, and then you have a whole bunch of commentators. And the problem we have is that on news channels, commentating also accompanies the news shows, and so it can be somewhat confusing for people who don't understand the difference. Sean Hannity, for example, he is not a reporter, he is not a journalist, he just has a show where he spouts off his opinion about anything to do with the president, and right now it's Trump. And it's been exposed that he and Trump talked to each other at bedtime, and that they shared Cohen as their fixer. We still have yet to find out what Cohen was fixing for Hannity. There doesn't seem to be a connection of Hannity to Russia, so it hasn't been pursued any further. But what was Cohen fixing for Hannity? Because the other two guys that Cohen only worked for involved covering up sex and paying them off. But people need to understand that even on the left-wing media organizations, such as MSNBC, they have commentary panel discussions, and that's not news. Those shows only discuss news when it breaks. Otherwise, they're a commentary show. They're an opinion show. The only actual news show on MSNBC is Rachel Maddow. Rachel gets involved in presenting actual documentation, actual recordings, and she only interviews and talks with people directly involved or having formerly been involved with the news topic being discussed. She does not do panel discussions. She does not even do opinions, though sometimes her opinion gets released. For example, when the news broke that babies were being held in cages, she emotionally could not handle the news and had to pass it off to Lawrence O'Donnell for his show. But Rachel is the best, even over Judy on PBS. PBS, they do news, they report the news, they cover all news, not just the presidential news. And they're able to do that because it's all from donated money. And even though it's the Rockefeller or Rothschild? Rockefeller, I think. But they actually just do news. And then you have your local and national news that occurs. But to identify people giving news stories or biased reports of the news, you need to understand what is sound versus what is unsound. That has to do with logical argument, logical or fallacious argument. I highly recommend you study up on what a fallacious argument is. For example, you can't name call. You know, you can't. A news reporter cannot get on the air and say these horrific terrorist acts. You know, they can't do that. That's an opinion. The one tip-off to the Las Vegas shooting as being fake news was when the reporter at the scene said the shooter. News cannot do that. They cannot assign guilt before a trial has commenced and determine guilt through a verdict. That's why all news reporters are supposed to say the accused, as reported, according to the cops, etc. And so news gets in big trouble if they assign blame before a due process in the courts with a jury. And so, yeah, it's a big problem today when we can't trust what's talked about on the news. You have advertisements for business perpetuated as news stories. You have a focus and a refusing to cover certain news stories. That's not part of a free press. That's covering up and not reporting the news. If you are an official news agency, you must report the news. The people must be informed about what's going on, and it must be told truthfully, and it must be told soundly. There's a difference between stating the facts and stating opinions. When you throw in adjectives, opinion adjectives, that's inappropriate for a news reporter. When you throw in statistical adjectives or measurement adjectives, that is required. I think it was the 70s when the news was showing violence, showing graphic scenes, and there were lots of complaints, and so the news had to stop reporting the news, and were forced to just say there was violent shooting and blah blah blah, and they got to conceal the actual videotaping of such events, and people started saying, oh, the news is just negative. You know, Aunt May's baking of a pie that day is not a news story. Even in a small town, that is not a news story. You know, the news is something that impacts other people's lives. And so, yes, crime is a news story. Natural disasters are a news story. But promotions of businesses, promotions of products, that's not news. And then you also have the problem where news does reports on studies. Studies show in a clinical trial, no. Again, go back to what a fallacy is, an unsound argument. These studies, when you recognize them, they come from biased sources who pay for the study so that the study comes out in a certain way. And if they have to eliminate the other results that go against the intentions of the study, they remove those, and they do small samplings of the populace. That's why polls. Everybody's big on polls in the news. Polls show that people hate Trump, down from last month. You know, come on. Polls are small sampling. Nobody's ever polled me. Nobody's ever asked me for my opinion. So I can't trust when the news comes out and says polls show this. You know, they're specifically designed to manipulate the emotions of their audience. They're trying to get us, the people, to act. And that's inappropriate. When you report the news, it doesn't come with a call to action. It doesn't come with a manipulation of feelings and emotions. But obviously, if you're covering a live shooting or a criminal, a crime in progress, then yeah, it's going to be very emotional. Charlottesville, for example, the car running into the crowd, and as a result, there was a woman who died. That's difficult to watch. but that's news. It must be seen. But to go there and portray only one side of it, that's inappropriate. Another thing I'm disturbed with is that the shows are trying to be balanced. MSNBC, for example, has a couple of their shows that include a Republican conservative supporter, and it's inconsistent with the Democrat point of view that MSNBC has. And when I'm trying to listen for news stories in the shows, I don't want to hear somebody's opinion. It's frustrating enough hearing the Democratic opinion, or the Democrat opinion, from the majority of the panelists, but then to throw in a conservative opinion on top of it, who fights and argues with the other panelist, and who spouts off the propaganda of Trump and the Conservative Party, that's unacceptable. That's not, sharing both points of view. Again, with freedom of speech, people do not have the right to lie. They do not have the right to promote criminal behavior. And when you say that Trump, for example, is the greatest president on earth and that God has appointed him and he's making America great again and the economy's better than it has ever been, and you can't lie to me. You can't gaslight me. I know what's going on. And so I don't want to hear somebody's opinion that is contrary to the facts and evidence. It is a fact that Trump wrote out after his inauguration the plan to lock up babies in cages. And then Sessions, a year later, made the announcement in California. Those are facts. Those are evidence. They were reported in the news. So to hear people on the conservative side say, oh, it's all fake news, it was Obama who did it. You can't gaslight me. You're not allowed to lie to the public. We just saw Sessions do it. We saw the document that Trump wrote and signed that was then implemented by Sessions a year later. Babies in cages. Come on. And now the news is being swamped with Trump's distractions so that he's now back to doing babies in cages again, and at a greater number than before when he was exposed. But that's not getting reported in the news. That's now been silenced. And that upsets me when the news gets distracted and they focus on one thing at a time and forget the previous things and forget to follow up on the previous news stories. Like with the hurricanes. Months after, where's the follow-up? Did those people qualify for insurance to rebuild? Or are they out of luck? Are they now homeless? Did they have to move to another state? The Carolina hurricane. What's going on there? It's over. So what's going on? What were the relief efforts? Trump touted that he was going to be prepared this time and it was going to be done right. But was it? Where's the news? They're supposed to cover this for us. And so I'm very disturbed with the press during these times. And Trump is partially right, but he's making it worse because Fox News is now Trump TV. That's the name for it now. And that's not a good naming for it. That's, a sarcastic naming, because we're not supposed to have national news. The movie 1984 had national news that lied to the people, that promoted propaganda rather than telling them the truth, rather than allowing people to be free and free thinkers. One of my favorite movie series is Starship Troopers. But it is about a fascist-run organization, that a new world order for the world under fascism, and they are distracting the people from the rights being taken from them with the constant battle with alien bugs. And by the third sequel, the third show, it was hinted that the fascist government was actually responsible for an alliance with the bugs to have a war between the two. And they haven't come out with a fourth movie. There's cartoon versions, but that never interested me. But if you ever get a chance to watch those shows, the first one especially has propaganda commercials that they show in between the movie scenes, and they're hilarious, but that's exactly what fascist government does on national TV. And so it's something to watch out for in our society, as you watch, for the first time ever, we have commercials about Supreme Court justices, Brett Kavanaugh, and MSNBC shows the pro-Kavanaugh commercials, and it's just disgusting. And they're still showing them after it's been exposed that the FBI will now investigate the sexual assault allegations. And yet the commercial has this woman saying, "Oh, I know Brett Kavanaugh, he's the greatest. We need somebody with integrity in the Supreme Court, and I support him." Come on, guys. And on MSNBC, you're appealing to people who are not gonna bother with that commercial. At least John Oliver, when he puts a commercial on Fox News' Hannity's show hour, he is intending to communicate with Trump, not the Fox News viewers. But this Kavanaugh commercial on MSNBC supporting Kavanaugh, come on, that's just not right. And even his record, Kavanaugh's record, we know the documents. Those are the facts. Those are the evidence of how he judges. And yet, conservatives don't get it, or they refuse to get it. And I hope you watched the hearings. I hope you listened to Kavanaugh's opening statement. The news was very good at covering, the thing. All they had to do was videotape it, and that's their news for the day. They don't need to give commentary on it. They just had to roll the tape and study fallacious arguments, and then compare those with Kavanaugh's opening statement. you will be horrified of all the matches you find to fallacious, unsound arguments. Kavanaugh is a judge. He has been educated, trained, and experienced in the field as a judge. You all know about Law and Order shows and legal shows and cop shows where a court is held. You have both the prosecutor and the defense attorneys trying to talk with witnesses, and the other side will object when something is said to the witness, asked to the witness. Nose hairs. Ugh. And the judge has to decide if the objection is sound, or if the question that was asked was sound, and that the objection is unsound. And so judges know sound from unsound argument. And yet there's Kavanaugh applying for a position as a Supreme Court judge, for a lifetime position in the Supreme Court, and all of the fallacies that he gave to justify him. That's just pathetic. And then you get the commentators saying, oh, it's a he said, she said, or he said, they said. Who's telling the truth? Who's lying? How can we know? If they're telling you lies by utilizing unsound logic, they're not telling the truth. It's that simple. You can tell from a person's words whether they're telling you the truth or not. You can tell if they're trying to deceive you. You can tell if they're trying to scam you. But if you don't know fallacies, you will get fooled. You will remain clueless. And you'll end up being involved in tribalism, picking sides based on your party affiliation or your feelings, rather than from what he said as to whether it was true or false. And so the press is the same way. They have to report the news. It's very simple to do. You know, when you're at a scene, you want to find out the facts. Instead, they talk to family members of the victims or of the perpetrator. That's not news. You want to talk to witnesses, first-hand witnesses. You want to talk to the victim or the perpetrator, if possible. But in many cities and states, the police make sure that the press don't get to cover the news. It gets silenced from the news. And that's not right. Police do not have the authority to deny the press the right to know what is going on. And videotapes from the police body cams are suppressed and released later. You know, who knows if they've been redacted and edited. But you know, you have a lot of problems when you cover up a crime scene from the public. I mean, obviously you don't want the press messing up the evidence at the scene, but cameras have zoom lenses on them. They can zoom in and out and stay out of the immediate crime area so they don't add footprints to a crime scene or fingerprints to a crime scene, or step on a heart that may have been separated from the body, you know, whatever the case may be. But for police to ban reporters from presenting to the people what's going on, that's just not right. Uh, Especially when it involves a school. Parents want to know if their kid is all right. And people say, well, they're minors, and so we can't reveal it because they're a minor. Parents, they want to know. And you can't keep the parents waiting, fearing for their child's safety. They need to know immediately. Is my child safe? Is my child alive? Is my child in the hospital? And so those things need to be addressed. And yeah, it has been discussed in panels that with all the fake news claims, all the abuse towards the press, all the distrust that's being sowed in the public mind over the reality of what the press is talking about, is going to put us in a dangerous situation when an actual disaster occurs. Will we, the people, be properly informed, accurately informed? Or will we be lied to? Will we not be able to trust what is being presented to us? The 300 Catholic priests in Pennsylvania who were involved not just in sex abuse, but they were involved in sex slavery. They were identifying boys who were it was just disgusting. That needs to be covered. And what about the other states? It wasn't just in Pennsylvania. This is a widespread problem. Why isn't the news covering it? And so these issues need to be addressed with. And it looks like the movie is coming to a close. So I'm going to have to deal with that. So I think I've covered most of the issues about the press. Again, the press cannot lie to us. They cannot deceive us. They have to report the news. They can't state their opinions. They can't have panel discussions. And they have to be legitimate press people, journalists, reporters, in order to be considered legitimate. And we cannot listen to a president who trash talks the press. He's already illegitimate if we have paid attention to the accurate facts of the election. So the next one is peacefully assembling.